All right. Well, let's bring in an FOS, a friend of Sting, Jayson Stark from The Athletic, and he joins us now. Jason, good morning.
Gentlemen, how are you?
Oh, Jace, man, good to hear your
You
voice.
too, Mark.
Don't throw any trivia on me because I can't answer it. But let me just right off the bat, man. I'm literally praying that these two sides come together and some type of baseball season is saved. What are the odds? What are you hearing?
Well, I think there's going to be some type of baseball. You could decide whether you want to call it a season, whether it comes after a deal, or whether it comes after Rob Manfred, Major League Baseball, just saying, hey, guys, here's our schedule. You'd better show up and play it. I can't tell you that yet, but I mean, we're heading for a bad place. We're heading for that cliff where it's just not going to be possible to make a deal. And I don't know about you guys. I've seen this movie too many times. It's hard to watch.
Why is there so much distrust between the two sides, Jason?
I mean, this goes back 50 years to Marvin Miller. That is some of it, but a lot of it is built up over the last 5 years in particular. You know, we don't need to run through all the reasons that players' anger has been building and distrust between the two sides has been building. And it's tired to do that, but we are there because we've reached this stage where March 26th, these two sides came to an agreement. Now it's June the 9th. They can't even agree on what they agreed on. Does that seem like a good sign? Doesn't seem that good to me.
No, it certainly doesn't. And, I mean, I understand kind of both sides of the equation, but why, if they did agree to, prorated salaries for 82 games or whatever it was they agreed to in March, why has there been such a seismic shift in that from the which looks to me on the outside looking in from the owner's perspective?
Well, it's complicated to try to characterize what they agreed to March 26th because there are really two sections that apply. If you just look at one of them, it's clear they did agree to prorated salaries. Whatever percentage of the season would get played, that's how much of a percentage that players would earn. If you just look at that section, it seems pretty cut and dried. But then there's the other section, which seems to clearly indicate that if it's not going to be possible to play without human beings sitting in the seats, that there's going to need to be another conversation. And obviously the union has viewed this the most narrow way it could and has just taken this attitude, if we don't get our full prorated pay, we're not doing this. And so every ownership proposal has been just way different than that, including the one made yesterday. And the fact that the union has shown no interest in budging and has really kind of painted itself into a corner with no wiggle room creates a really difficult climate to try to negotiate. I've covered a lot of labor in my day covering baseball, and it's never pretty. One thing I try to remind myself is not to do too much play-by-play, but to think about where it's leading. The problem with where this is leading is there's never really been a sense of common purpose. This has never been a conversation about anything. It's like two tennis players practicing their serve, where balls are flying by them and they're not even looking. That's where we are.
Jayson Stark from The Athletic, award-winning baseball writer for many, many years. Is this something, the negotiations, is this something, in your opinion, that needs to be done in a vacuum with what's just going on right now? Or do the negotiations have to factor in where the sport is going down the road? Can they be done separately, or where how are they looking at it?
I mean, I don't think you should do anything in a vacuum. First of all, the optics of having this fight over money at this time in America couldn't possibly be worse, uglier, more distasteful. It's incredible to even talk to people in baseball about that. I've had people who work in baseball tell me they're embarrassed right now, that they're sickened by this, that they're disgusted by it. And they work in the sport. So there's that whole aspect of it. And then there's the bigger picture. I actually think that's kind of a solution, which is not to necessarily look at how you're going to address the economics of this season, but start thinking beyond this season to what's going to be a really painful offseason for a lot of players. You've got something like 2/3 of the players who don't have contracts beyond this year, and a lot of them could pay a really difficult economic price for that. I'd be looking to try to protect them if I were the union, and try to, there was a little shred of that in the proposal yesterday, in which baseball offered to not attach a draft pick compensation to free agents who signed this winter, who would normally have it. And that should be a starting point for conversation. But again, like of all the words you would use to describe this, conversation isn't one I'd pick.
With all that's going on right now and the disdain that you talked about and the disgust between the players and and baseball in general, if this doesn't come to some type of agreement where they can't come and have that conversation, how much irreparable damage does this do to baseball? Like, where does it set it for the future?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I wrote a column last week urging this sport not to drive off that cliff, because I covered the strike in 94, 95, and I was on that conference call with Bud Selig the night he canceled the World Series, and I'll argue that baseball's never recovered from that. They've made a lot of money, but baseball has never occupied the same place in the American culture or the American heart and soul that it had before it cut that cord. This would be worse. The question is, what happens if they play, but just by forcing players to play? Play a 50-game season or a 48-game season. You can't go on strike because that's illegal. Just show up and play, but we're not going to come to a deal. I feel like damage would be done by that, and that damage would be irreparable. What do you guys think?
Oh, I don't think they should even bother. if that's all they're going to do is play 48 games, Jason, don't even bother. I know they will play, but
they will.
They might as well not even bother. What's the concession area? What's the middle ground area that the players are willing to perhaps step into to get a deal done? Or is their line in the concrete already drawn?
Have you seen one? Have you seen an area where the players have shown a willingness to compromise on the economics? I haven't seen that. Major League Baseball hasn't seen that. Now, look, the positions taken by Major League Baseball, the proposals they've made have been just as one-sided in a lot of ways. It's all been stuff that they knew the union would never entertain. There's never been an economic proposal by either side that provided a jumping point to a deeper conversation and a deal. And that's what we need right now, is we need some path to that middle ground. There's been stuff in each of the last two proposals by each side that could be talked about and maneuvered around. But if the players are never going to give on we need to have 100% of the prorated salary, then I just don't see any sign that Major League Baseball will concede that point unless the season is really short. And the reason to talk about playing like 50 games is they've decided how much money they think they're willing to pay the players in salary. And now it's up to the players to decide, here's what we'll pay you. You decide how many games you want to play to get it. That's kind of where we are.
And do you see any chance of all of a sudden the union kind of flipping a 180 here and making some concessions on that salary to get this thing rolling? Because
we're going to find out in the next
Jason.
36 to 48 hours,
right,
because MLB is looking for a response. If I were the union, I would say, all right, here's what we will do. We'll pay for a 10% reduction in that prorated. In return, you got to give us greater chunk of the postseason, or you got to give us minimum payrolls next winter. We're going to need something really significant back. But that would be a move toward conciliation, right? Toward compromise. It would provide a path to some kind of deal, and that's what's got to happen. I had this realistic voice in my head which keeps saying that before they go over the cliff, survival instinct will take over, and they'll say to themselves, we can't drive past that sign that says cliff ahead. But until we actually see an offer that shows us they're listening to that voice, I'm worried. I'm an optimistic guy, as you know, but I'm having a hard time using the word optimism right now.
Yeah, it's man, we really appreciate the insight and the knowledge, man. We've already missed what could have been the greatest day, the greatest return ever.
Yeah.
Baseball on the 4th of July would have been, I mean, even if there's nobody in the stands, it would have been one of the great, it would have been a great showcase for baseball. We're going to miss that. I just you know how much I love baseball, man. I just want it to come back, man.
Mark, I think you share this. I am sad over that.
Yeah.
What an opportunity lost, right?
Yes. I mean, it could. Like I just was envisioning barbecuing and sitting from the morning. You know, the game starts in the morning in the East Coast, and it's Boston and New York, and then we go to Chicago and St. Louis, and we finish with the Dodgers and the Giants, and we're like one of the greatest days of baseball ever on the 4th of July, celebrating America. It just would have been amazing. And I'm like, you knuckleheads.
Yeah.
Anyhow, hey Jayson, man, really great catching up. Great to hear your voice, buddy.
You too. Really a pleasure to be on, and let's talk again soon.
All right.
Be well, guys.
Jayson Stark from The Athletic. Great stuff.